session, and we have our first speaker here. So I'll go ahead and call the meeting to order, and hopefully David can join here shortly. So the first item on the agenda is approval of the agenda. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved. Dana.
Second.
Okay, all in favor, aye? Aye. Opposed? The motion is approved. Next on the agenda is the approval of minutes. Is there any debate on the minutes? Any questions? If not, we'll entertain a motion to approve the minutes from the last meeting.
I'll motion again.
Thank you, Dana. Thank you, Dana.
I guess I'll second it again.
Perfect. All those in favor, aye? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion is passed. All right, first thing on our agenda this evening is to hear from Worth County Conservation, and I see Jim has joined. So, Jim, we'll give you the floor for the next little while. We, as you know, we're considering an ordinance that would include language related to commercial wind development. And so we'd specifically like to hear your thoughts from County Conservation on what your involvement has been in the past, what you think it should be in the future, things that you want us to make certain that we consider or include in our ordinance. So the floor is yours, Jim.
I guess my standpoint is basically that they just follow and treat the county wildlife areas the same as they treat the state wildlife areas as far as setbacks go.
So I don't know if you're aware, but the state, the Iowa DNR, they don't have any law regulations regarding setbacks, as I understand it anyway. It's all recommendations. So are you supportive of those recommendations, and you're wanting those same types of buffers placed on the county lands?
Yeah, that would be kind of what we would go with.
And then have they been engaging with you guys early on in their planning process at all on these past projects?
Not on the past projects. On the current project, we have had a meeting, and we're going to continue to meet. So.
Okay. And then do they give you copies of any of the Iowa DNR reports that they get, the recommendations and reports?
Yes, they said they will share them, their report, the DNR reports, and then also their environmental assessments that they do themselves. Is what they said.
Okay. Okay. So that's just on the one that they're currently looking at in the northwest part of the county. They've not done that. They've not done that in the past.
They have not done that in the past. I will say that the Iberdrola or Avangrid company, they actually contracted us to do their environmental assessments and then actually do their surveys after they were established.
So what was that, the Freeborn project or some other project?
That was, is it the top of Iowa? Is
Okay.
that the one by you, Justin?
Yeah, we're two, but Jim, wasn't that the one over by Grafton that they contracted you guys to do?
It was both farms.
Okay, all right.
Because there was one of the towers that I did search on was on one of your guys' farms, so I know that we did them in both. So
I think it was one straight south of Bell Creek Church, wasn't it?
Yep.
Okay, so everything over there by Elk Creek Church and west, those are all top of Iowa. There's 3 top of Iowa projects that were over there. And then the other projects are Barton project, which is the one over towards Grafton. Yeah. And then the most recent one was the Freeborn project.
Yep.
So did they engage with you on the Barton or no? It
On
was just
Barton,
top
they,
of Iowa.
on Barton and top of Iowa 2, I think is what it is what the 2 farms were that we were. But those are, like I said, those are the ones that are operated by, it's Avangrid now. It was Iberdrola when we did the contract work for them.
So they contracted you guys to do the environmental study?
They did. And then actually the follow-up, because they do that, Iberdrola or Avangrid, they actually have a pretty extensive environmental program where all of their employees are trained to do, avian searches and then bat searches for potential kills from the towers. So that once they got all their staff trained, they essentially didn't need us to do it anymore. Top of Iowa 1 and Freeborn, I believe, are going to be operated by Vestas, and Vestas doesn't contract us at all, or never has in the past. So,
Okay. Do you know? Did they do habitat conservation plans then as well, or no?
I believe top of Iowa 2 and Barton does have them, but I'm not positive.
Okay. But they didn't provide you guys a copy of them and involve you in those at all?
No. But with those,
Okay.
with both of those two, I still have regular contact with the head environmental person for their company that's based out of Portland, Oregon. But they actually, I just met with them yesterday. Actually, their head environmental person actually is originally from Northwood and comes back pretty regular.
Okay. All right. Joel, I see that David has joined and he is muted. David, did you mute yourself? Or okay, all right.
Yeah,
I just want to make sure that you can speak.
I did mute the 1292 line. I don't know who that is, but there's a lot of noise coming from it. So if they do want to speak sometime, they just have to do a *62.
Okay.
I was also in my meeting yesterday with the Avangrid environmental person. They did say in the future, if we need any assistance with environmental, ideas or what we want to see done, they said they would be more than happy to help us through the process. And I know that he was going to reach out to Enos. I believe he was going to try to yesterday because I gave him Enos's cell phone number. So, because he said he could give some references of some non-biased people, he said. So,
Okay. And that's who is that from, you said?
It's Jerry Ruppy is who it is. He's the lead environmental person for Avangrid. So top of Iowa 2 and Barton.
Okay.
If you want, Jeff, I can email you his contact info later too.
Yeah, if you could, that'd be great. Thanks. So you mentioned at the top of the conversation that you'd like to see them treat the county protected areas the same as the state. And we recognize the fact that the state doesn't regulate by law any setbacks or buffers. They provide those things via just as recommendations, certain distances for certain types of areas and things of that nature. So outside of that, as a general statement, Jim, is there anything specific that you think we should have in the ordinance outside of, engaging you guys earlier rather than later?
I don't
treating
think
the county lands the same.
I don't think there's anything else really that I would say at this time, just based on the fact that I think once you guys get zoning in place here, we'll be involved earlier in the beginning and it'll be better for everybody, I think. So.
Okay. And I know you and I spoke briefly when I first contacted you about coming on the meeting. And I'd asked you then if you had an inventory of lands that should be protected. Can you just relate the substance of that conversation for the commission at large about what lands the county has and where people would find those?
As I say, the majority of our county land is actually in the said project that we're talking about here. But overall, as a county, we have 3,000 acres that Worth County manages. And like I said, the bulk of them are northwest of Northwood. So it falls within this project. I guess from my standpoint, there's certain areas that the county may not own that they're used during migration, like when the sandhill cranes come through in the fall. There's some ground that there'll be quite a few sandhill cranes on, and that would probably be one of the areas where I would want them to steer clear of. And I expressed that when I did meet with Mark Kroll, that I said there's some areas I want to talk to you specifically about that the county doesn't own, but I think would have a big impact on wildlife as they migrate.
Right. So I guess two things I want to follow up there. One is the migration, which I'll come back to. The other one is how would anybody know? How would these energy companies know, or some citizen within the county? How would they know what lands should be enrolled in this? In these protections. Are they registered with the state? Is there some way that
they're not registered at all? It really is just your local resources who see the migration patterns, because over the last 4 or 5 years, we've had northwest of town, we've had, like I said, increasing numbers of sandhill cranes come through in the fall, which it's not a state protected, or it's not a federally protected species. In a lot of states you can hunt them even. So it's something that's unique to our area to get back into the area. And so that's where I think that you would have some of the issue.
Okay. So outside of the migration for the sandhill cranes, but just the specific, the land that the county owns, that stuff is evident on the DNR, the Iowa DNR site, isn't it?
Yep.
Okay, so you guys register it there. Do you think, would it be possible to add the boundaries of those lands to the county GIS?
They are on the county GIS right now.
Okay. So they can see them there. All right.
Yeah.
So with regard to migration, I did note that on the on a federal migration map and the regional migration map, it shows winter and summer migration routes going right up through the middle of Iowa. Are there migration paths that we should consider or be cognizant of with regard to keeping some areas clear in the county?
I was going to say with waterfowl, because that's what I'm most familiar with, because they're what you see in big migrations. I know that in the fall, the DNR actually does waterfowl surveys weekly. And so they kind of track the migration through the state, so to speak. And they lump it together as Rice Lake or Clear Lake areas, because that's where the DNR is based out of, is Clear Lake. But Rice Lake and Silver Lake are the two main lakes or areas in our region that they actually go and count. And so you can actually see kind of the migration pattern there. But for a lot of things, the migration it shifts to follow essentially water is what, most birds when they're traveling, water is what they're dependent on. And so if we're dry, they shift either east or west, but we are right in a pretty heavy migration area.
Okay. So is it something that would be possible for county conservation or maybe Iowa DNR to tell us whether there's a regular migration path that we should try to be cognizant of?
The waterfowl biologist for the state of Iowa is actually based out of Clear Lake as well. And so he may
Okay.
have more information about that. And I can get you his contact info also.
Okay. All right. Thank you. All right. I've kind of commandeered all the conversation. Other commissioners, you guys have questions for Jim while we've got him on the phone?
Yeah, Jim or anybody, do you know what the setbacks have been set for by the state for like Silver Lake or your other areas? What have they been talking for distance?
They haven't actually said distance when I've talked with them.
Okay,
Yeah, I've got some information on that from a DNR report that was given to Invenergy with regard to the Worthwhile Wind project, and they talk about protected wildlife areas and other public lands should be buffered by 2 miles. Other permanently protected areas buffered by 1 mile. They call out some specific sections within the county that are of concern with their recommendation, specific to Elk Creek Marsh Wildlife, Silver Lake Wildlife, Brights Lake Wildlife, Hogsback Marsh, Waterfowl Protection Area, Rice Lake Wildlife Area. They also talk about 4 prairie pothole joint venture priority areas that should be protected, and they call out some sections there. And then they talk about a fen wetland. I'm not sure what that is, with the some various flora and fauna that should be protected in a particular section. They're recommending a 5-mile buffer of eagle nests, and they identify where eagle nests have been located. They talk about a buffer of at least a 1/2 mile on any grassland or wetland habitats that are 40 acres in size or larger. Again, those are just recommendations
I'm very
from the
glad to hear all
DNR.
that. Is there any mention
sorry?
of the I-30? Is there any mention of like the I-35 Monarch path? We are a highway for the migration of monarchs.
No, they don't mention that in this that I've seen.
Something that I'm inquiring about, Jim or whoever, is pollinators. If I understand it right, pollinators, bees, hummingbirds, and then like your night owls, they all fly like 125 foot or less off the ground.
Yep.
So is there anything in there that we should be inquiring about as far as keeping the ground to the bottom of the blade tip height at 125 feet or more?
I mean, I guess that's something to consider. You know, with the Monarch Highway or whatever, with them essentially saying I-35 is the corridor,
Mm-hmm.
you know, is close. If you look at, you know, I'll use Barton 2 as an example. The closest turbine to the interstate is probably as close as they can legally go to the interstate because of the federal setbacks from the DOT. You know what I mean? So there is kind of still a natural corridor, so to speak. It's not like they follow the interstate completely. I mean, you know,
Right.
but there is some of that kind of already built in with the fact that, you know, the main corridor there is buffered, so to speak. But
Mm-hmm. It's my understanding that some of these wind power companies are just now starting to do studies on pollinators. Is there anywhere that we could get information from one of them groups?
Jerry might have some info, but he didn't speak specifically to that. He did actually, he has talked about like the Nighthawks and things like that, but specifically with pollinators, he didn't mention anything with that in any of our conversations we've had. So
I know I'm gonna talk to him Friday about that stuff, hopefully, but I didn't know if you had any information.
no, Jerry'd be probably my best resource for that.
Mhm.
Okay. Anybody else have questions for Jim?
Jim, I got a question. I'm gonna go the opposite of Todd. The sandhill cranes and the waterfowl, I mean, obviously it depends on days and everything else. What altitude do they fly at?
Oh, when they're migrating, they can be high. I mean, they can be really high, but when they're local, they can be, in any range, really. I mean, you'll see them as specks in the sky, and you'll see them right at ground level. I mean, it's all over the place.
Okay.
So it's really not so much passage over the state from a migratory perspective that would be of concern. It's when they're coming into and going out of
Right.
their landing areas, the water areas.
And if they do take into account, the recommendations from the DNR about, buffering like Elk Creek and Silver Lake and Rice, I mean, that's going to catch the majority of where our concerns are.
Okay. All right. Any other questions for Jim then?
Yeah, third-party validation on some of this stuff ahead of time versus during project and completion of project or down the road. Can you talk a little more about that?
Like I said, for me, it's just, I would like to get input put in right away is my biggest thing, just because Iowa's a unique state in the fact that we do have county conservation boards. So we actually have people out on the landscape every day. You know what I mean? Where the DNR doesn't have those people, that they're covering 8 counties, 10 counties in a crack for most of their wildlife units. So just like I said, having that local input from the beginning is kind of my biggest thing.
Were there specific areas that you thought we needed to address, Dana, on third-party validation?
Well, I'm just thinking maybe down the road, going through, they do a turbine change or blade change or something like that. Do we need to cover additional validation again? I mean, placement's one thing, but if blade size changes or anything like that, I don't know if it would be impacted or need to be.
Yeah, I think if we have these buffer areas, well, first of all, we've identified the specific areas that are of concern, and then we've got buffer areas. I think I know from a federal perspective that if there is a threatened or endangered species or a bald or golden eagle, any of those kinds of things, that they, by law, if there's a potential that they could take, any of those things, by take, it's harm, interrupt, kill, etc. They're supposed to get a incidental take permit from the federal government, and that incidental take permit requires a habitat conservation plan. And the habitat conservation plan then, if we get copies of those, county conservation can look at those. Then I think we can make certain that there is third-party validation on some of those things, and it's not, the fox guarding the hen house telling us how many chickens they're saving.
Right. So from a conservation perspective, yes, I think that's, where we need to go. But also just any parties that they're calling or doing it in-house. I don't know that I like the thought of them doing some of this in-house.
Oh, sure. Yep.
I will say that I do know that they, well, like I said, I can speak to to Top of Iowa 2 and the Barton Farm that they actually do a good job in-house. And part of the reason I say that is in Barton, they're the only one in the county that I know of that's actually had an eagle strike. And so they went through everything with Fish and Wildlife. And after that, that's when their employees started to realize you're not getting in trouble as an employee for noting that something happens. You're actually doing your job and noting that something happens. And so it's the employees actually understand that.
Okay. We have just a couple of minutes left before we need to jump over to our next speaker. Any last questions for Jim? And Jim, I'll just ask if it's okay if we follow up with you if we do have some additional questions that people come up with after we're done with you this evening. We can follow those up, and we'll just send them to you in writing, and you can answer them that way. Is that satisfactory to you?
That's just fine. I'll jump off, and if you guys come up with anything else, just shoot me an email and I'll get back to you.
Okay. Any last question for Jim then? Yep. Okay. All right. Thanks, Jim. I appreciate your time with us. And we will move on now to the next agenda item, which is hearing from Kossuth County. So Joel, if you're on the line yet, if you could unmute Doug Miller. And let me send Joel a text just to make certain. Well, there's Doug Miller right there, and I see you're not muted. So I guess he's got it. So Doug is joined us for the next 15 minutes or so. He's works in the engineering office there at Kossuth County, but is also wearing the dual hat of zoning administrator. And I've asked him to join us this evening to talk a little bit about what the process was that Kossuth County used to develop their ordinance, which is a standalone wind-related ordinance. And it's also somewhat unique in that it's a conditional use permit that's issued, but the permit is issued by the Board of Supervisors as opposed to the traditional Board of Adjustment issuing of conditional use permits. I think there's only one or two other counties that I've seen that reserved that to the Board of Supervisors. So, Doug?
I don't have anything, I guess, to present. I guess if you have questions, yes, our ordinance was developed by the Board of Supervisors. They chose to not have planning and zoning make any determinations. They wanted to have it all on their shoulders. So we have two permitted and constructed wind farms in Kossuth County, and we have a third that is permitted. So we have been through the permission and the construction both. So.
What was what kind of reception did your ordinance get? And just for those commissioners that might not have read the Kossuth ordinance and compared it to some of the others, it is among all the ordinances that I've read, and I've read through 34 different counties across Iowa, wind-related ordinances. Kossuth stands out, one, as a very recent one. It was approved in late 2018. It's fairly comprehensive. It addresses a lot of different things. It's also got one of the larger setbacks. I think you have a 1,600 foot setback. Most of the others are a little bit less than that. And then along with the rest of the stuff that's in the ordinance, how was your ordinance received by the residents? We'll start with with the residents in the county.
Well, there were residents that were for it, and there were residents that were against it. So,
Right. Do you have a sense of the weighting? I mean, did it seem to satisfy? You're always going to get outliers on both sides of any question.
I don't know. The board tried to tried to be fair. And naturally, when they were developing the ordinance, there were people that tried to set setbacks so great that they would not have been able to put up any kind of an energy conversion system. It would have just eliminated everything. And there were people that did not want little or very little setbacks from residences. So I don't know. I can't answer that. I just know that the most vocal were the people that were against it naturally.
Sure. Yeah. What about from the energy companies? What kind of a reaction did they have?
I believe that they thought that it was workable. We actually had 3 developers. I'll say we had 2 developers and we had 1 energy company approach Mid-American Energy. They chose to, after our ordinance was adopted, they chose to pursue other ventures. I'm still waiting for a letter why they left Cassuth County. There's a lot of rumors out there, but I'm still waiting for that letter. They haven't provided that to me.
So you had one energy company that was talking about a project, and then they left. They said, nope, we're not going to do it.
Yeah, they were developing a project in a portion of Cassuth County, and they, for whatever reason, left Cassuth County. So.
Okay. And you've had energy companies develop projects since the ordinance, correct?
That is correct.
And you said there was 2 of them and 1 in the works?
There are 3 developers, yes. We had 2 developers that are initially approached, and a 3rd developer came in afterwards. So we have 2 existing in Cassuth County, and the 3rd one is supposed to begin later this. It'd be the 3rd quarter of the calendar year.
Okay. And when you and I spoke, I'll just recap our conversation that you had mentioned, I believe, that the county had hired an attorney to, I don't recall if it was draft the ordinance or help draft the ordinance, and that during the process of crafting the ordinance, that attorney got employment with another law firm that also happened to represent Invenergy, and that Invenergy and Cassuth County entered into an agreement that said it would not be a conflict of interest for that guy to finish out his work on your ordinance. Is that correct? Is that accurate?
Not exactly.
Okay.
Our ordinance was drafted by Eric Adey. When Invenergy actually started to develop, and we needed some additional legal help, that's when Eric had left one law firm and went to a second, and that he drafted it all while he was employed.
I see. Okay. But I thought there was something you had said where you guys did have an agreement that his continuing to work on something, even though he was working with this other firm that represented Invenergy. Am I recalling that accurately?
Yes. There were landowners that were making accusations and causing legal actions to happen against Kasuth County. And when that happened, the Board of Supervisors needed legal representation. And at that time, when asked, that's when we asked Eric if he would represent us. However, there was a conflict because of whatever legal ethics and representation. They had worked, the law firm that he is working for had worked with Invenergy, and that's what caused that's what caused that to happen.
Okay. All right. So it was the timing issue I had inaccurate there. Okay.
Correct.
All right. Other commissioners have questions for Doug? Now's the time to pick the brain of somebody that's gone through it.
Sure do. Did you guys get involved with, I know this sounds like a company choice rather than the county, but did you guys get involved in selection of, let's say, GE equipment versus a cheaper line equipment? Was there any discussion on that?
As far as the type of components that are being used on a wind farm?
Correct.
No.
Because there's quite a quality difference in manufacturers out there, which also affects decibels and the amount of repairs and flat bearings like we've had in our county. And it's my understanding that just like buying a car, you've got a Chevy and you've got a Cadillac. And I didn't know if anybody tried to have some quality control with what was going in.
We did not.
In hindsight, do you wish you would have, or no thought on that right now?
We have one, I think it's way too early to determine that. One of our wind farms is 18 months, been in operation for 18 months, and the other one's going on 12. So I guess, to me, my own personal opinion, both of our wind farms are owned by Alliant Energy. And I trust that if they're going to invest $4 million per turbine, they're going to make sure that they get quality. But that's up to them, I guess. I don't know.
Thank you.
Sure.
Anybody else have questions for Doug?
Yeah, can you talk a little bit about the permitting process that you guys go through for a project?
Sure. Our ordinance, we have quite a bit as far as siting and design, but the developer, the energy company, they need to do an application that is submitted to me. That application, then it has information about the company. It has a list of the people that are the owners, has what's called a development plan, and that's the where the turbines are sited at, shows where the property lines are at, drainage. We have a lot of drainage districts. It shows where any kind of a public drainage facility is located. Shows where communication antenna, airports, that type of information. Then it also gives the details where this gets into the components and who makes the components, tower heights, rotor diameters, those types of things, the numbers. Then we require that they give us documentation of legal control over the property that they have, so that it can be reviewed and make sure that everything is in fact, they have enough under legal control to construct the project. We asked for a list of public roads that they would be using in order to construct the project. We have a fee of $1,000 per turbine that's paid upon the approval of the permit by the board. And then we ask for FAA, FCC, state and federal permits that are approvals that are needed for the project. We ask for a report that their turbines will not materially interfere with any existing commercial, public safety, those types of communication systems. We ask for a report by a third party using modeling software to try to determine, make sure that no residences are affected by flicker. We put on there that they cannot have over 30 hours of flicker per year, or more than 30 minutes per day of the shadow flicker. We require a decommissioning plan, and then anything additional after review. After that application is in, the zoning administrator is required to bring it to the Board of Supervisors, so that they're aware of what is going on. Then also a public notice and notification to the public is provided in newspapers, as well as it's mailed to landowners within a 1 mile radius, I believe is what it is. After the complete review and after everything is satisfactory, there is a public hearing that is required. The notice of the public hearing naturally goes out. And then after that public hearing and after final submission of the public, or excuse me, the final development plan is submitted, then we issue a permit if everything's satisfactory.
Doug, I know the fee that Kossuth has, the $1,000 per turbine, is materially larger than the majority of the other ordinances that I've read. Do you get any pushback or flack from the energy companies on that?
No.
And do you know what the background was on how they came up with that number?
Again, the Board of Supervisors, through public hearings, listening to the public and discussion at their meetings, came up with it. Again, there were some people.
Yeah, I know there's a substantial cost to just going through all the work and all the different entities in the county that's involved in getting permits issued for these kinds of things. So I just was curious as to if that was based on anything in particular. Is there anything in your ordinance that now that you guys have had it for a couple of years and you've had development come through, is there anything that you would change in the ordinance, or that you wish it could change?
Well, we are actually amending our ordinance right now. We have a cap on the nameplate production that can be production that can be put in the county. We have it at 700 megawatts right now, and that was really based. We knew we had 3 developers or 3 proposed wind farms, and we were going to cap that. The board right now is amending that, and they're going to put it at 600, which is actually what is permitted. We have 590 megawatts permitted. So we are amending it. However, we do need to amend it again, I know. And that is because of repowering. Since we have that 600 megawatt cap, if turbines right now, say they would have turbines that are 2.5 megawatt and they have 100 of them. And when they repower, they have 3 megawatt generators. We would go over the, we would end up going, or that would make that nameplate production increase.
Right.
But we have to come up with some things because the way that I look at it and the way that I've talked with some other people that I've met on the development side and on the contracting side and on the ownership side, repowering can be what I call substantial and non-substantial. Substantial repowering would involve increasing footings, increasing tower components, bases, increasing total height. That would then require another analysis of flicker, making sure that setbacks
Right.
are correct. It would take quite a bit. A non-substantial would be the total height would stay the same. The relative scope of each turbine would not change drastically. That would be quite a bit easier. So we do have to come up with some language and develop some stuff for repowering.
Sure.
And I think that would be advantage if you take that into consideration while you're developing yours.
Yep. And you're, just for edification, the limit on the total nameplate capacity, it's the mechanism that the county is essentially using that will limit the number of turbines that go in. You're not specifically numbering the number of turbines. I know some counties have put a limit on the number of turbines. You're saying we're going to base it on nameplate power. So if you can achieve that in 1 turbine or 500 turbines, that's what it is.
That's correct.
Okay, we have reached the end of our time with Doug. Our next speaker is not online yet. We're supposed to hear from our county engineer, Rich. I don't see him online. Hopefully he'll be joining us here in another minute or two.
Well, I'm going to take
appreciate your-
off if that is okay
Yep,
with
I appreciate
everybody.
your time with us, Doug.
Tell Rich that Doug Miller said hello. I hope he's complimentary towards me at least. So, you guys have a good evening.
All right.
And good luck
All
with your ordinance.
All right, thank you very much. Okay, well, I'm not sure where Rich is. I don't have an email or a text from him. I did get confirmation from him that he was going to join. I don't have a cell phone for him. Joel, if you're still online, would you have a cell phone number for Richard? Could you ping him and ask him if he'll be joining us? All I have is his office number. Let me shoot Joel a note real quick.
Hi, Jeff. And
Hey,
others.
Joel, do you have Rich's cell phone number? He's supposed to be on now, and he is not.
Let me look that up here real quick. So I have 641 220 3341.
Hang on a sec. Just a minute.
Okay.
What's that number again? 641.
220
Yep.
3341.
Okay, thanks.
Sure.
Okay, I just sent him a text. And meanwhile, Dana had asked a question if I have a copy of the permitting process for Cassuth County. It's in general what Doug had laid out is in their ordinance, and I can send you a copy of that. And in fact, as I mentioned, I'm trying to stay ahead of all of this with my work. So I've already started pulling language out of a variety of these ordinances. I've leaned on Cassuth quite heavily to create some draft ordinance and some draft ordinance language. And so we've got a lot of material available for us that spell out these processes for us to use. If there's some of those that you want to read, if you want to read those various ordinances, then I can send you copies of those as well. Well, we're going to run out of time to hear from Richard, and
So,
I haven't
I
got
think-
a text.
Oh, Rich has apparently he's got a bad Zoom link, so I'm sending it to him now.
Oh, okay.
I'm not sure where he got the one he's got, but
Well, I sent it to him via email. I don't know if my copy paste missed part of it.
Jeff, as a follow-up, do you have any of that stuff on Google Drive for us already or not?
No, I can put stuff out there. I pulled the draft that I had put together. I had that out there. I pulled that because we've been hearing from folks. I've been adding more things to it. So maybe it'd be easier just to put that one out there because that pulls it in from everywhere. And we're going to be going through that stuff here in the next couple of weeks anyway. So Rich is going to be hopefully joining shortly. He'll be joining late. Is anybody going to have a problem if we run the meeting a little bit long this evening so we can hear from him today?
Jeff, while we're waiting, I've got a couple of comments that I've learned. Other places in the country where they've had controversy of the people who want windmills and who don't. One county did their entire energy policy as a co-op so that everybody shared in the money, not just with the tax base, but actual paid every resident instead of just landowners. I thought that was pretty interesting. Big way to get everybody in favor is to get everybody money. I mean, it's the truth.
Yeah.
Money talks.
All right. I think that'd be a challenge to try to manage.
Don't know. Another piece of information. One of the largest renewable energy companies is out of Florida, Next Era. They're a heavy hitter and they're very, very professional. Just food for thought in case the name comes up. Kind of the opposite of Invenergy.
I deal with NextEra all the time in Winnebago County, and they touch base with me probably weekly to kind of find out how things are going, if there's any issues. By far the most professional. They communicate all the time, so I have nothing but good things to say about those guys.
Awesome.
So it looks like Rich is in process of joining.
Can I blame
He
Joel?
Popped up.
Can I blame Joel?
No, I don't think you could blame Joel. I sent the, well, I just copied it out of my calendar and sent it to you via email. I'm not sure how I get that pasted in wrong, but.
Well, and I used the one off the website too, and it wouldn't let me in. So I don't know what happened.
You can't blame me.
Well, I can. It just doesn't work.
Yeah, there you go.
I'm not sure why, because we've got there's other folks that are on that the only place they would have gotten it would be from the website.
Yeah.
So I don't know. Anyway,
Sorry to make you wait.
Well, that's all right. The important part is you're here. So just by way of introduction, we've got Richard Brum online with us, the Worth County engineer. I've asked him to join and talk to us about what the experience has been in the past with regard to the commercial wind projects, what kinds of things that we need to consider as we think about an ordinance around commercial wind energy in Worth County. And if we have such an ordinance, what kinds of things do we want to make certain are in there from a county engineer perspective? So with that, by way of introduction, Rich, the floor is yours.
Okay, well, as far as ordinances go, you know, we're talking about equipment going on private property, but they are using public roads to access the property to build. And with that, we have in the past, and both Mitchell and Worth County have gotten road use agreements with these companies to, you know, to help preserve or repair our roads after they're being used. So from the standpoint of whether or not we get reimbursed for damages or whatnot, I think we're learning as we go, and we're getting better at these agreements. I think the thing that kind of concerns me is when it comes to zoning, especially with this with wind towers and what we've been able to do with the TIF. And I know that's probably not a good word to bring up, but I'm going to bring it up anyway, because we're in a position now where without TIF, our infrastructure is not going to be able to handle the repairs it needs for the future. That's good or bad. I guess you guys can look at it any other way you want to, but what I'm hoping is that there isn't such a strict zoning ordinance where they're not going to be able to build anything anymore, where we can't utilize some of the value out of that to maintain our infrastructure like we need to. I've made the comment before that when I first started here, we had TIF that first group of wind, maybe not the first group, but we had wind tower TIF coming in, and we were able to do a substantial amount of work just to kind of catch up. And what I've told the board this last year is we're in a position now that other counties were 10 years ago, where they were turning roads back to gravel. Our funding isn't what it needs to be to sustain, so we need to be able to have a way to find local money to do the things we need to do with infrastructure. And right now, TIF is probably the best way to do it for us. Now, that's all up to the board on whether or not they want to use that money to do things. But from a standpoint of local dollars, there's not enough there. And so what I'm hoping is that if there is some zoning, which it sounds like people would like to have zoning, I hope it's not so restrictive that it doesn't allow some sort of progress on whatever to come in here so that we can utilize funding. I don't know if that makes sense to anybody or not.
Yeah. So in short, you're saying don't do like Madison County did and say you got to have 1.5 miles setback to property lines, buildings, cemeteries, roads, etc.
You're gonna kill it. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
The-
Which was their intent.
Yeah, and I know that sounds terrible because I know there are people that live out in the public that want the rural setting and they want the quiet, they want, you know, the peaceful, but I don't know whatever Worth County is going to have come in other than right now. I know it's considered industrial wind and industrial solar. I don't know what else is coming into the county where we can capture any funding to continue to function the way we need to. We get some big businesses coming in, which I don't know that's going to happen, but you know, right now for the county engineer standpoint and budgeting, you know, we need to find a source to continue to maintain our roads and bridges. And
Sure.
unless somebody else has a better way to capture more tax dollars to fund it, I don't know.
Rich, do you have an
Yeah.
opinion on what setbacks should be?
Not really. I guess I used to live in Mitchell County. I live in Mitchell County. I used to live in a wind farm area there, and I think the closest wind tower to me was I want to say I measured it off the GIS, and it was like 1,700 feet. I guess the location where I lived, I didn't get flicker, but maybe very rarely ever in the evening in the wintertime when the sun's to the south. I had tower to the south, tower to the north. Let me see. I got a couple of questions here. Mind if I respond? If I can get to these.
There are questions that you're
Another-
getting from Zoom.
Yeah, I think.
Yeah, so the meeting, it's a zoning commission meeting. It's a public meeting, but it's not a public hearing.
Okay.
So we've got the agenda. So the zoning commissioners that you see on your screen, Justin, me, David Quisley, Dana Thomas, and Todd Rothove are the zoning commission.
Okay.
And so the meeting is for the purpose of us hearing from you and having a conversation with you,
All right.
just as part of our research to try to understand what considerations should we be aware of as we consider,
Sure.
do we think the county needs an ordinance and so on. So we'll have a separate time period once we've heard from the folks that we invite to speak. There's additional research that we're doing, and then once we craft our recommendations, we'll publish those recommendations and any draft language to the public,
Sure.
and then we'll have a public hearing on those specific recommendations. And that way, I think it'd be easier for the general public to look at specifics of what we're recommending, and they can comment on those kinds of things.
Sure. So I guess from the county engineer standpoint, as far as offsets to the public right of way, you know, I don't know. We've got, you know, large power line right off the right of way of the county roadway. I mean, I wouldn't suggest you put a tower that close, but I would say that whatever offset you have to a house would probably be pretty close to adequate for off the highway. I don't know how close. I haven't measured any of these current ones and how far they are off the right of way. Some of them are a lot closer than they are to houses, obviously. But so
Okay.
as far as
You mentioned,
public safety goes, I guess you know, anything can happen with a tower. I guess I really don't have much of an opinion on how far off the right of way these things need to be. Obviously, you want to keep it away from the public, to a safe distance from the public, and if there's a safe distance from the houses, and most of it's based on sound and flicker and whatnot. You know, you don't see a lot of that when you're traveling down the highway. I mean, you'll see it, but it's not going to be that big of an impact to you as you're moving through the wind tower zone versus living right next to one. So I think that what's probably been put out now as far as distances from roadways, I don't really see a big issue with. I think the bigger issue for most is how close they are to residences.
Okay. You mentioned you've got the road use agreements and if I recall correctly, do they combine road use and drainage into a single agreement, or do they have separate ones?
In Worth County, they have, just because because the Board of Supervisors oversees drainage districts, they made it all inclusive where they have the road and drainage agreement. In the document itself, they're separated out, but there's a section for road use and then there's a section for drainage. And I even think they got into, I know that it's all private property as far as private tile goes, but I think there are, I'd have to read one. I haven't read one recently. I've got the current one that they're trying to work on, but I'm going through that and redlining. We're learning a lot from this last tower project that we want to add into the next one, if there is a next one. Some things that I've been noticing different that we'd like to change.
Are there things that you think should be in the ordinance related to road use and drainage? Recognizing that the ordinance would be something that the energy companies would be looking at, hopefully very early in their process, to understand, what the rules are, what the requirements are.
Sure. I don't know if the ordinance could say that the wind tower group needs to create an agreement with the county for road use, or if the ordinance has specific requirements in it. Sometimes it's nice because not every project is the same. Would you keep the same verbiage from one to another? However, for the most part, we've been building off of old ones and learning as we go. So whether it's in there, either the ordinance would state that they would need something, an agreement, or maybe the ordinance has the agreement built into it. I guess that's something to consider.
Yeah, typically what I've seen as we've been researching other counties is it talks about the fact that they have to do a study. They have to identify all the roads and everything that would be used for the construction of the project, the operation of the project, the maintenance of the project, and that so they do that pre-construction survey, identify the roads, make sure they understand the weight limits, then get with county engineer to go over those things, identify what kinds of changes might need to be made to the roads in order to accommodate the project.
Yep.
And then making certain that there must be an agreement in place that addresses the maintenance, the restoration of the roads, and things of that nature. And then on closing of the project, there would have to be a completion survey done jointly with the county engineer to say, yep, everything is back the way that it's supposed to be, or no, you got to fix this yet before you do it.
And I'd have to say that for the projects we've been on, even in Mitchell County and Worth County, they've been really accommodating in that regard, as far as, wanting to follow the rules, wanting to fix the damages, they'll pay for anything. And I'll tell you right now, the stuff they did in the northeast part of the county, as far as roads go, I'm not talking about private housing or anything like that, but as far as the roads, they did more to our roads than we could ever afford to do in those areas. It's amazing what they were able to do on those roads that we could. These people stuck over $2 million into these roads, and that's something the county could never afford to do for what they did. There's an advantage as far as that goes, as long as the agreements are good. They want, and maybe people disagree, but they want to leave a good mark with the public. Yeah.
So you talked about they put in a boatload of money into those roads, and I think you mentioned earlier that funding has changed, and we want to be sensitive. We don't want to kill the projects that kills the TIF, because you need it for infrastructure. So can you just briefly, is there funding that has changed that's created that circumstance?
I don't know if it's changed so much, but I think that it's more has to do with the cost of construction and materials has gone up faster than any sort of taxes have. I know everybody's feeling it. They all feel they're overtaxed is the way it is, but things got more expensive. And I'll tell you, 10 years ago, I know Winnesheet County is one who had to turn roads. They had seal coat roads. They had to turn back to gravel. They couldn't maintain them anymore. I think Worth County is probably one of the counties that has the highest paved service road per capita in the state. I can't verify that. I was always told that. We've got a lot of paved miles, and it's expensive to maintain paved miles.
Right. Okay. Yeah, I didn't want to dig into funding. I mean, funding
Right. No,
not really
funding,
a part of.
I guess everything is there's never enough money to do anything, obviously. We try to do what we can with the funding we have, but things get tighter,
Yeah. Okay.
And whether or not the boards ever want to use the TIF, that's completely up to them, but
Yeah.
there are needs.
Yeah.
And so I'm not proposing or saying that we have to use TIF all the time for infrastructure. It's just, there always seems to be a need for funding. And I don't know where else to get other than raise, people don't want their taxes raised either. So, but I guess we're not here to talk about taxes. We're not here to talk about secondary road funding. We're talking about zoning. And my opinion is maybe there needs to be some sort of a zoning requirement, but let's not make it such that nobody can ever build.
Right. Yep. Yeah. And there's that was your point on the TIF. I thought I'd heard you say that the funding had changed on something.
No, just things get more expensive.
So yeah. So the kinds of things that I described that are in a number of the county ordinances with regard to commercial development on the pre-road survey, making certain there's an agreement in place that covers everything. You think you're generally satisfied with the language of the agreements?
Yeah, they've been working.
You've learned.
Yeah, I'm fine tuning the next one. If there is a next one, I've got some things I want to cover, and it's more has to do with the ongoing, maybe more of the traffic safety than it is anything else. So, but actually kind of maybe being a little bit more detailed in what we're expecting out of them. But for the most part, they've been pretty decent.
And do you think those kinds of things are best addressed in the agreement as opposed to spelled out in the ordinance?
They can probably go either way, but maybe the ordinance could be more general in the fact that it requires, the ordinance can require a road use agreement and a drainage agreement versus spelling out every detail. That's one way to handle it. Keeps it less wordy.
Yep.
And letting each project then determine what the needs are for, a wind tower project brings in probably, I'm going to assume, since I haven't seen a solar power project, but I'm going to assume a wind tower project is bringing in heavier equipment than a solar powered unit. Maybe the road uses are different. Still a lot of traffic on them, but maybe not as heavy loads. Each project's different. So do you want to generalize all projects into one, or make it on a per project basis and just say that the zoning requires that the owner works with the county on a road use agreement and drainage agreements?
Yeah, I just didn't know if there were categories of things that we wanted to make certain were in the agreement. So the details of what those categories are would be in the agreement, but just the fact that, the ordinance says you got to have an agreement, and the agreement has to address the details for the following kinds of topics. Just as, kind of a checklist kind of a thing, just to make certain that, because the agreements typically, they come from the developer, right? They send them to you guys and say, here, sign this unless there's changes that you require.
We've sent them back with changes. So, but yeah, that could be a good idea. We could work with that. We've got plenty of agreements to pull from and categorize certain things to cover. So that certainly is possible.
Okay. All right. Yeah, I might follow up with you on that and just see if there are some categories that we want to make certain that the agreements cover. Yeah, that way we're not leaving to chance that the agreement that they give us actually hits it, or that we remember to put it in.
Sure.
Okay. Other commissioners, you guys have questions for Rich?
I was a little surprised to hear that your experience was really good with these guys trying to be working with you to keep everything good, because originally I thought we had a lot of tile problems and a lot of trouble getting ownership or payment from the windmill companies for tile problems we had down here originally. That was my understanding.
See, and I guess I'm working from a different aspect of that because I am rarely involved on the drainage tile side. That's more the supervisors. I don't recall, and this would have been probably, I don't know, Todd, are you talking about the last wind tower project?
That was probably under Jim Hyde instead of you, I suppose. I'm not sure.
Yeah. I know that my experience in Mitchell County and even in Worth County right now is I'm not getting a lot of drainage things forwarded to my office. And I don't know if the courthouse is either. I don't know. In both instances, and I'll use Mitchell County as an example also. I've been doing that, but it seems as though these contractors really want to keep up with tile. And so in the past, in this project in Worth County, and I think even in Mitchell County, they had a tiler on call to repair stuff as they saw fit. And I don't believe that they just want to leave anything damaged when they're gone. I think they've had enough of these now that they know that they're not going to be able to walk away from damaged tile without having to pay to fix it. And a lot of these things, if we're talking about drainage districts, that's one thing. But if we're talking about private tile, some of that has to go back on the landowners themselves and have some really strong agreements with them individually to have these tile repaired. I don't know. I have not been hearing issues with tile on this last project. And maybe you guys have. You guys are probably more in tune with the private landowners and their woes, but I have not.
Well, one of the points that was brought up by the Farm Bureau, Andy Hill spoke to us as the representative from the County Farm Bureau, and he made a point that some of the damage that's done for during construction might not become evident for a couple of years down the road.
Yep, that's true. You could have a dry year when you're building, and then pretty soon you get a wet year and you don't know you've got crushed tile that can't take all the water.
Right. So it's perfectly feasible that we're not hearing a lot of noise from the Freeborn project right now.
Right. The fortunate thing is landowner knows where that heavy equipment's been driving, so they know they can kind of zone in on where the problems may arise.
Yep.
But I guess like I said, Todd, I haven't had anything brought up to me as far as drainage on these projects. So I guess that's good or bad. Maybe you've heard stuff I haven't. I don't know.
Well, just like we talked about in the past, sometimes it takes 3-4 years for a problem to show up, and the company's been gone for 3-4 years, and they go, wait a minute, we fixed everything, or how do we know it's us? I guess that led me to kind of a brainstorm. I thought, I'm going to go off on a little bit of a branch here, but if you got $1 million crane and a $250,000 payloader running around out in the country, maybe they should be required to have GPS and have it tracked and recorded where they've been and on file for future problems.
Oh, yeah.
Just an idea. I mean, a $200 globe on $1 million machine in a project like this is nothing, and it can save a lot of headaches in the future of who pays for what and if they were actually there.
Well,
I don't know.
I'm trying to remember if this last agreement, if they were supposed to have, I haven't read it in quite a while. It seems to me at one point in time there was talk of maybe having them actually open cut everything that was around a farmer's tile if they knew where they were at, instead of just knifing through. I'm not sure if this verbiage is in that agreement or not. it's a burden on them, but it's a good burden. You guys are going to know what you have if they open them. They're probably not going to find everything, but I mean, there are other instances where the landowner can probably have a stronger agreement than the county can have, because I think most of this stuff we're talking about is probably more related to private tile than it is public right of way and drainage districts. I know when they go through drainage districts, that's where the agreements actually come in, is for the drainage district
Right.
tile themselves.
Right.
And I guess what I can put in from what happened on project 2 over here was they knew where the county tiles were. The problem was the unknown tile lines that were there that were private. And like I think I said a week or two ago, that the problem was, like Todd said, you take these heavy cranes across, and instead of making a nice, stay along the fence line and then go over, they just went at an angle across where they felt like going. And they may not have even dug or anything, but just the weight of that machine crushed it. You might have found out the next week, and you might, like you guys might have found out 4 years later. I do think in our project, a lot of it was just unknown tile lines that nobody knew were there.
And do you think, though, I think now more than ever, since the last project to now, there's more GPS locating of tile when they're put in. And second, I think I'm seeing a lot more on these maps that they are actually combining. I don't know what that other project, Justin, you guys were on, but it seems like these guys in their plan sets have crane walk maps in the plans so that every landowner knows where that crane is supposed to travel. Now, whether they change that or not, I don't know. But it seems to me I've seen maps where they show this is where the crane's walking from tower to tower. And I don't know if that's a GPS location or in general or how that works.
Well, the problem with known and unknown tiles is even the county tiles are not exactly where the maps are.
Yep, exactly.
The cranes don't always exactly drive on their planned route. And even if you're using matting, like a lot of projects have the big mats, the flippers. Once the crane pulls out, the second crew comes in with a 100,000-pound payloader in the mud. That's why I was wondering GPS on everything over, let's say, 6,000 pounds, or it can't be on the project.
Sure, and that can be, that's definitely something you can add to it, or even the private landowners can put that in their agreement. I agree with you. There's no reason why for the
if you got GPS, you know where they were. I mean, if the GPS don't work, you don't roll. You're off.
Yeah,
just an idea.
Yeah.
Okay. Other questions for Rich? Nope. All right. Well, thank you for the time this evening, Rich. I know we went a little bit, well, actually quite a bit later than.
Well, I kind of held you up a little bit by accident there. So, but you guys all know where the office is. If you got questions beyond that too, and we'll, my office is willing to work with you guys on an ordinance if you guys want details and things like that, past history thing. So don't be shy to ask the questions, and we can work with you guys on that if you guys decide to go that direction.
Great. All right. Well, I appreciate your time.
All right.
Thanks, Rich.
You guys have a good evening.
You as well. Okay. So next on the agenda is just talking about next week. So I had sent everybody a document last week, I believe, that laid out a series of questions. I think we need to go through those, vote on those so that we all have an agreed on direction of what we want to do. We can talk next week to identify if there's any other invited folks that we need to, or any other speakers that we need to invite to talk with. Otherwise, the next activity that we have lined up, once we've identified our course of action, is to talk through the siting considerations. And I think I had also provided, and it's on the shared drive, all the different categories from the review of the all the other county ordinances. I've identified those. So next week, we'll go through the questions, vote on those, determine our course of action, identify if we need to have any other speakers, we need to go through and make a decision on those categories, which of those categories, if any, if all, whatever the, you know, whatever the group determines, that we want our ordinance to include, if we decide that we're going to want an ordinance. And then once we've got those identified, then we'll talk about the details of what go into each of those categories. So for instance, one of the categories is setback from human buildings. Do we want our ordinance to cover that, assuming we want an ordinance? If yes, then we'll have to talk about, well, what level of setbacks do we feel necessary? To help facilitate that conversation, what I propose is once we've identified what the categories are that the ordinance should cover, I'll provide you with a draft ordinance with complete language that will have a starter, my personal recommendation, if you will, on what those details are. And then we can go through that and make changes and have discussions on those, all working towards the goal of making adjustments to that draft to come up with whatever we feel is the appropriate draft ordinance based on our direction and selected categories. So those are the next week and actually subsequent week agenda. Does anybody have questions, conversation, suggestions for different approach on any of that stuff? Nope. Is there anybody that did not get the list of questions that we'll have to vote on? Is there anybody that did not get the table of all the different categories that had the broad ranges that we found? Because you'll need those next week.
Are those in that drive? Jeff?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. Okay. Well, any other discussion on next week agenda then? All right. I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Okay. Motion to adjourn the meeting. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? The meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everybody.
Jeff, can you give me a call after the meeting? Do you have time for a short call?
Yeah.
All right, thank
Yep,
you.
I do. All right.